So go back and remove these new lines. Alright, so we replaced our /n with indels. So let's go ahead and save this program and then build it. And this time, after we build it, instead of clicking on this button here to run it, we're going to click on the button to debug it. So we'll still be running it, but we'll be able to interactively go through this program. So go ahead and left click on that, and you'll probably get a little dialog box here that says confirm perspective switch. So you can go ahead and click on remember my decision on this. It's asking, do you want to open this perspective now? And the answer is yes. So anytime that we want to go in and do debugging, we want to switch perspectives. So go ahead and click on yes, and you'll see that the view here, the perspective, has changed. It looks a good bit different than what we were looking at previously. But we still have our code over here in this little window. We have a little window here for debug, and we also have a window here where our local variables will show up. Maybe I shouldn't use the term local variables. We haven't discussed that, but our variables will show up over here. We'll get to local variables soon enough. All right, so what can we do? So our program hasn't actually executed yet. We're at the very beginning of the main function here, but we can step through or interactively go through this program line by line. So going back up here to the debug area, there's a button here that says step over. So hopefully you can see that button that says step over. Now if this little window is not showing up for whatever reason, you can go here to window here on the menu bar, and then go to open perspective, show view, and then select a debug here. So once you select that, you should be able to see this window. All right, so yeah, back to stepping over. So we're going to be using this button here to go through line by line and execute our program. So go ahead and click on that button, and you'll see now that we have a little green shading here on this first line in our main function. So we're about to execute this line of code here. So go ahead and left click again on the step over button. You can also use F6, so if you prefer to use F6, that's fine. So you'll also notice that after we executed this line of code here, we have score, the type of what score is, and the value showing up here in our variables view. So that's pretty cool to be able to see what our values, our variables are going to be, and also the current value of those variables. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is execute this enter an integer score between 0 and 100. Now, if we did not have this indel here and you kept the /n, then whenever we step over this line of code, so I'm going to go ahead and step over it, you wouldn't see that actually coming out on the console straight away. It may take a few lines of instruction before it actually flushes that buffer or pushes the string or the text out to the console. All right, so now we're going to step over again. And this time we've got to input something. So we'll input the score 95 and hit enter. And now you can see up here in our variables view that the score's value has changed to 95. It was 0 and now it's 95. So now we'll do this test here. We'll test to see if our score is greater than or equal to 90 and our score is less than 100, which it is. Let me scroll down a bit so you guys can see that. And I'm going to click on step over. And so now, since we tested true for this, and we're now in the body of that particular if statement, we're going to execute the cout statement. So we should see awesome show up, and we do. But now what you'll notice is, since we have if statements in here, each one of these if statements will be tested. And that's not necessarily a good thing for this program, because we know that the way we set up these ranges, our score can only fall into or be test true for one of these conditions. So we're testing these unnecessarily the way we have our logic here. So it tests that one, then it tests the one for 60 to 69, and then finally 0 to 59. So all those are unnecessary tests. And then finally it gets to the return 0, and then we're pretty much done with our program here. Okay, so let's switch perspectives back to our normal editor. So up here on the right-hand side, we have the debug perspective. But if we go over a little bit, you should see like two little arrows. It almost looks like our extraction operator. but it's not. Just left click on that and then left click on the C/C++, and that will switch us back to the original perspective that we had for editing C and C++ programs. So we'll do that, and we can close this little error message here, so ignore that for now. And we're back here to our code. So what we're going to do now is actually change our code a bit so that we're not testing each one of these conditions. We want to write this so that as soon as we test one of these conditions and that condition evaluates to true, we don't want to test any others. And the way that we can do that is using the multiple alternative else if. So after this first if, we can replace the rest of these with else if. And you can even replace this last one with an else if, but we can actually do one better than replacing it with an else if. If we've exhausted all other possibilities, we could actually write this last alternative as an else. So we can get rid of the test. We can say, okay, we've tested every other possible scenario. We know it has to be sad times if they didn't make the right score or whatever. So let's go ahead and save this and compile it, and we'll see the difference here. So let's save it and build it. So that's compiling and linking it. And now we'll launch our debugger again. So I'm going to go ahead and step over, just like we did before. So our little step over button here, our F6. Step over again. So we see now that we have our score here, and its value is currently 0. Now we get our output. And now we need to step over. Now don't try to input any values here until you've actually stepped over the CN line. If you don't step over that CN line, it's not going to be trying to get input from the user. So we got to do that. Step over. So now we can input a value here, and I'm going to input the value, I don't know, let's input 85 this time instead of 95 and see what happens. So we'll hit enter and see what happens. So it's about to test this condition here. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit. So if the score is greater than or equal to 90 and score is less than or equal to 100, obviously 85 does not fall into that condition. So let's go ahead and step. And so it skipped over. It didn't go inside of this if statement here. So we had that if condition, but it didn't make it inside of the body because that returned a false value when we evaluated the expression here. Now it looks like we're going to qualify here, right? Because the score is between 80 and 89. So we'll step over, and you'll see, in fact, that it does go to the C outline. So we'll get well done here. And whenever I clicked on step over again, it took me all the way down to the last statement. So it skipped over all these other alternatives because the way we constructed that using the else if. So there's a big difference between using else if and if statements. If we have if there, it will test those. If we have else if, as soon as it meets a condition and executes the associated expression statements for that particular condition, it doesn't bother doing anything else. All right, so let's go ahead and stop this program. We can click on the terminate button here, and we'll switch back to our other perspective for the editor. And the last thing that we may want to do, I guess we could end up in a situation where someone inputted a number like -50, and -50 would end up printing out sad times, but actually that's not even a valid score. Our score is supposed to be between 0 and 100. So up here we could actually put in a test to check and see if the score is less than 0 or the score is greater than 100. Because we know if the score is less than 0 or if the score is greater than 100, we have an invalid score. So go ahead and put in an open brace on the next line. And here I'll just do cout and say an invalid score was entered. I'll say inputted maybe. And we'll say program will terminate. Okay. And maybe we'll use our endl. So let's see. Insertion operator endl, semicolon. All right. So once we do that, we can do our return 0. If you want to, we'll save this and test that out real quick just to make sure that that does work. So save that, build it, and then launch our debugger again. So let's go in here and run it one more time. So use our step over. We'll declare and initialize our score variable. And then we get this outputted to the console. And this time we'll type in, I don't know, -50 and see what happens. So it gets the value -50 assigned a score. Step over again. And you'll notice that this time we're testing the condition to see if the score is less than 0 or the score is greater than 100. So if either one of those conditions are met, then we want to say that we have an invalid score inputted. So that's going to be true. We'll get that outputted, and then we'll just simply terminate the program at that time. All right, so you can go ahead and click on terminate, and then flip back to our original perspective. So we've looked at several things here. We looked at using the else if as opposed to just using the if. We saw the difference between using if and else if. We looked at using the endl and what happens, why we would want to use endl as opposed to using the new line character. Usually if you're going to be using the debugger and you want to see your output immediately, I would recommend using the endl. So yeah, we've seen quite a few things here. So that's it.